How much protein do you need? What is the optimal dose? So many people get this wrong because there's a trick to it. We are going to solve it starting right now. What is going on? My name is David Barr. If you're looking to get bigger, faster, stronger, get leaner, go longer, hit that subscribe and then the little bell so you don't miss the latest tips and tricks. Today we're talking to everybody's favorite topic, protein timing, dosing, all that kind of thing. Today we are actually focusing on the dosing. Acute dosing, not the dosing over the course of a day, but how much protein do you need? How much is optimal to stimulate maximal protein synthesis? That's that growth, adaptation, recovery response that we're all after. How much protein do we need to optimize that effect? Real quick, if you're a subscriber, stay tuned to the end because I got your next step to optimize your muscle growth and fat loss. I was so into this answer that I actually picked up my life, moved to Texas to study muscle protein synthesis, figure out the optimal dose of protein, nutrient timing, all of that kind of thing. And it was actually one of my mentors, Dr. Tipton, who recently published a study showing that if you're using whole body workouts, you actually need more protein to optimize that protein synthetic response. So go up to 30-40 grams whey protein is going to be what you're after if you're using whole body workouts. Now the trick to this is when we would study muscle protein synthesis, we would have the subjects fasted overnight. So we would have them stay in a hospital wing overnight. That way we would control their feeding, their timing, their sleeping, all of that. And it wasn't a trick. We weren't trying to skew the data or anything like that. It was just to control the variables, control as much as possible, because studying protein synthesis is very tricky. We have to puncture arteries and infuse all kinds of stuff. It's potentially dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, which is why we do it in a hospital wing. But the key is we have to have the subject's protein fasted. So there is a baseline there in a catabolic state when we start. Again, the key is to optimize protein synthesis to control the variables, because the way we study protein synthesis, it's a really insensitive technique. So you look at significant findings, statistically significant findings, and it's just not optimal because you need a huge data set and it's, again, just not really sensitive. So earlier studies showing optimal dosing, about 20 grams, 25 grams. But again, keep in mind that it is not a sensitive measure. So I would have a minimum of 25 grams of fast protein, like a whey protein, right upon waking, or if I am in a protein fasted state, like if I'm crit loading, for example, after my workout. The timing doesn't matter. I talk about this in other videos. I'll link to that in the top right and the description. But the trick is, if you're training whole body workouts and you're fasted, you're going to need a higher protein dose. So I go with a minimum of 30 grams because, again, it's not a sensitive measure. I never want to go below the maximum dose. And that's a key that most people miss out on. So they'll hit 20, 25 grams based on the research, not knowing that, hey, if you're actually training more, you have more muscle mass, you're probably going to need more protein, right? And that's exactly what one of my lab mentors shows. Dr. Tipton in his lab showed more muscle being trained, the more protein you're going to need at a single dose. But again, this is protein fasted. So here's a trick. If you have consumed a meal of like casein or like a steak or some slow absorbing protein, slow digesting protein, having more protein within a few hours isn't going to matter. Okay, this gets into something called anabolic density. I'll talk about that in other videos. I talked about that in my first two books called the Anabolic Index. And the reality is proteins digest and absorb at different rates, so the dosing is going to change. The dosing to optimize your protein synthetic response. I don't see people talk about this, and that's a problem because it means we're not optimizing our protein dosing. So real quick, I want to hear from you. What types of protein dosing are you using? How much are you having per serving? How much are you having per day? Let me know in the comments below. Here's a bonus tip for you. Talk about this in my first textbook chapter, co-authored with Dr. Josh Cotter. Great textbook. Doctors Lonnie Lowry, Joey Antonio of ISSN fame. I don't make any money off this, but this is a great resource. The idea of using leucine, that nutraceutical effect of leucine to optimize muscle protein synthesis, you only need a couple grams to max it out, but keep in mind the leucine is not going to sustain muscle protein synthesis. It only starts it. It's like the key turning the engine to a car. Doesn't keep the car running, right? You need the gas for that. That's where the rest of the amino acids come in, the rest of your essentials especially, but the leucine can kick off muscle protein synthesis. A couple grams of leucine, you'll be fine. Check out the BCAA video I did, branched chain amino acids. I'll link to that in the top right and the description, because right now people are using leucine and BCAAs and they're broken. They just don't work. As much as we love them, they just don't work. So I have 3 potential tips based on my own lab research, might help us fix that. So I've given you a lot of info here. So what's the summary? How much protein do I need? Well, again, it's going to depend on the individual, but you probably can't go wrong if you're a healthy individual and you're not in a caloric deficit. So you're eucaloric, topping out 30 to 40 grams, 40 grams at the high end. If you are protein fasted and you're doing a whole body workout, you're just going to need more protein after that workout. Otherwise, 30 grams is fine. If you have a low anabolic density protein like a casein, you can go a little higher. So 60 grams is going to be fine. 40 is going to be sufficient to actually block the catabolism overnight. Again, link to my casein video in the top right in the description. If you're not using casein, it is one of the most anabolic supplements that we have. People are just not using enough slow protein overnight. People think that nighttime sleep is our most anabolic time. That's a myth. We need to destroy that one. So check out the casein video for more on that. So here's your bonus tip. Not only do we study people when they're protein fasted, but the other mistake people make is that it's going to be about your total protein intake per day. So again, if you're in a caloric deficit, you're going to need more total protein. If you're training whole body, you're going to need more short-term protein. So again, up to that 40 grams. But if you're just doing regular eucaloric diet, you're training heavy, focus more on your total daily protein intake. We'll talk about that in other videos. Otherwise, just make sure you're not protein fasted. Feed overnight with the casein, whatever slow protein you like, and make sure you're not fasted for too long in the morning, other than crit loading, which we talk about in other videos. So there's your protein dose solved, 30 to 40 grams, but focus on that long-term dosing. Thanks for watching. I'm David Barr. Until next time, raise the bar.